As Lindsay mentioned earlier, it is the weekend of General Synod for the United Church of Christ, which is being held down in Baltimore, Maryland this weekend. And you will probably have seen the sign out front at least the first couple of times that you visited here, for some of you recently and for some of you many years ago. But after that, the sign tends to disappear from view. It says on the sign right up by the street, Union Congregational Church, United Church of Christ. There's even a little logo on that sign. Did you ever notice that logo? The United Church of Christ is actually in the process of giving that logo the heave-ho these days, or claiming it as a historical logo while employing a newer, hipper, more colorful, less cross-oriented logo, which is fine, except that the new one is a blue circle with a comma inside it, and everyone who looks at it for the first time thinks it looks like a toilet that is being flushed. So there is some work to do. Anyway, there is a logo on the sign out front. It's on your bulletin cover this morning. It is the one that the United Church of Christ has had for many decades. It comprises a crown, a cross, an orb, enclosed with a double oval bearing the name of the denomination and the prayer of Jesus that they may all be one in the Gospel of John. The crown signifies sovereignty, the cross being a traditional symbol, and the orb, divided into three parts, is intended to remind us of the command to be witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Logos may not matter much to you. You may also agree that this one that we have on the bulletin cover this morning is in dire need of a refresh. But more importantly, there will likely be considerable diversity among us today as to what it means to belong to a denomination at all, and this one specifically. We can mark shifts in attitudes towards religion in all sorts of ways, and one of them is certainly a key trend. The younger you are, generally speaking, the less the denomination of the church that you attend matters to you. Plenty of exceptions to that, of course. But it's typically more important to have the church that you attend reflect your values and offer you a sense of belonging for many folks these days more than anything else. Of course, the denomination impacts both the values that you find and the sense of belonging that a congregation has to offer. Now, we tend not to talk a lot about our sense of belonging to the United Church of Christ in worship services here at Union Congregational, at least in my time here. And there are a variety of reasons for that. So you may not know that I serve on a local denomination board, as does Amy Hohenstover, as have many other people over the years. Ina Isobi goes to every conference or association gathering that she can, and she's connected that way for decades. Oh no, you may be saying internally now, oh no, I have walked into a history lesson that either A, I already know, or B, I don't care about, or C, I might be interested in hearing about, but certainly not for an entire sermon. Fear not, people of God, fear not. I've come with stories more than statistics. I've come today with a sense of gratitude. I've come to celebrate. I've come to celebrate as the UCC celebrates down in Baltimore. And I've come to celebrate because I know that there are Union folks down in Baltimore volunteering and serving, Ina and Betsy, Martin, Betty, Bailey, Bob Chase, to name 5 of us. General Synod is a big get-together that happens every couple of years. In 2019, it will be in Milwaukee. I am still waiting for the rotation to get to Honolulu, and then I will probably be attending General Synod all of a sudden. At Synod, many important decisions have been made that reflect our long-standing commitment to what some have called justice, others have called prophetic witness, some may call peacemaking, bridge building, or living out the call to love our neighbors. And that tradition goes back, way back. You can go to Robert Brown's writings in the 16th century in England, or you can go further back than that to the other Protestant reformers. In the United States, the tradition goes back to the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Plymouth Colony and proceeds from there in establishing some institutions of learning like Harvard and Yale, the Emorys of the North, and churches that began in New England and spread slowly from there. Skipping decades at a time here, advocates for abolition tended to find a home in the congregational churches. Indeed, one might argue that if there is a feather in our cap, it's the work of abolition, which is a pretty big feather. The formation of the United Church of Christ, which was a merger of the Congregational Christian churches and the Evangelical and Reformed Church in 1957, meant that the UCC began to slowly take on a more diverse look. Congregational churches in the Central Atlantic region, California, and New England began to include originally German-speaking congregations in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And as members of these churches had already spread westward, one began to find UCC congregations all over the country. They are in every state, from Maine to Alaska, Mississippi to the Dakotas. Now, the reading from Jeremiah today may not just roll off the tongue. It's about two prophets, one named Hananiah and one called Jeremiah, and they are each telling different stories about Israel's future. Jeremiah's version of events that are about to happen is significantly gloomier, but also more truthful. But listen now to this word that I speak in your hearing and in the hearing of all the people, he says. What he's trying to say is that Hananiah has spun some tall tales in trying to get everyone to hear what they want to hear. Hananiah is saying everything's going to be okay. As we endure shifts and changes and transition, everything's going to work out just fine. There's not going to be any weeping or gnashing of teeth. The trouble will be over soon. But Jeremiah is in a popularity contest, and so he brushes this to the side. What you say is wishful thinking. There's trouble brewing for all of us. But when we hear a word of peace from a prophet, a godly, covenantal peace, then the true prophet will have come, he says. None of this business about saying what people want to hear and just trying to make it true. Whenever you hear of sudden shifts in attitude and culture, and whenever there's a real attempt at justice, there will always be trouble. There will always be people who resist forward momentum. There will always be people who fight and resist and shout about the long arc of the universe not bending toward justice. But it does, and every true prophet knows this. And because justice is hard for human beings, because it sometimes involves giving up on your own self-interest, people will naturally work hard to avoid it. People will resist change even when they know it is the right thing to do. Like Jeremiah, we as a denomination lost the popularity contest a long time ago. These days, we have about 900,000 members in 5,000 churches. In 1957, we had over 2 million members in more than 7,000 churches. Which isn't to say that every single UCC is struggling. The struggles mirror those of many other denominations like the Lutherans and the Methodists and the Presbyterians. And the reasons for the decline in these churches are many. Less love for institutions these days, less love for religion, at times a lack of relevance or seeming entertainment in those churches. Simply, it might be a matter of the great platforms of our church, like abolition and civil rights, having actually won and succeeded. Many UCCs aren't struggling. There are pockets that can be found all over the place, from Maine to Hawaii, and surprisingly to some of us in places like Dallas, Texas. Cathedral of Hope UCC is a 6,000-member church that ministers primarily to LGBTQ folks in Texas, which at 6,000 members is not actually that big of a church for Dallas, but it is pretty big for the United Church of Christ. There are small churches and big churches, historically black churches, the most famous of which in the UCC is Trinity UCC in Chicago, which is also the largest in our denomination with around 11 or 12,000 members. There are Spanish-speaking churches, Hawaiian churches, the Korean United Church of Des Plaines, Illinois, and the Korean UCC of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And yes, your whitened structure and composition of its members, New England Church on the Green in Connecticut and New Hampshire. Your used-to-be German-speaking in Pennsylvania and Illinois congregations. The church I served in Chicago as a field education intern really broke with tradition in the 1990s when they called their minister Wayne McPherson A non-German, oh my gosh, who doesn't even speak German? What the heck? From a numbers perspective, the denomination may not have even hit rock bottom yet. There are hundreds of predominantly rural, small churches that close their doors each year as economies and sensibilities change. Where the UCC was once dominant, sometimes evangelical churches moved in with a simpler message or better music, or maybe they just cared more about the people. And sometimes no other church moved in because the town itself was dying on the vine right next to the church. The UCC is a modern denomination and has had its ups and downs and roundabouts, and they are inextricably linked to American society and culture. As Jeremiah indicated, though, you can't just wish your way into the right thing. When you try to do the right thing, there's often pain and sadness and fear about doing that right thing. Abolition and civil rights, of course, were the right things to do, even as they caused trouble. Full membership and ordination of gay, lesbian, transgendered, queer individuals is almost taken for granted in some parts of our denomination now, but it certainly was not always so. June 25th is a historic date, and so is June 27th for those of us in the UCC. On June 25th, 1957, the United Church of Christ came into being as the union of the Congregational and ENR churches. But on June 27th, 1969, the Stonewall Rebellion took place, when for the first time gay and lesbian individuals resisted police raid on the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, rather than meekly submitting to arrest. Only 3 years later, in 1972, Bill Johnson made some history of his own as what they called then the first openly avowed homosexual person to be ordained into mainstream Protestant denomination. When he was ordained, he selected Sunday, June 25th, the UCC's anniversary and the weekend of the third anniversary of the Stonewall resistance. At Bill Johnson's ecclesiastical council, this is a time when candidates for ordination present a paper about their call and their theology. Lindsay will be doing that at some point, we hope fairly soon. Candidate will present to delegates from all around the association, and they will often debate the credentials of the candidate for somewhere, in my experience, between 5 and 30 minutes. Bill Johnson had quite the time getting to his ecclesiastical council, and so he knew he had to have his A game when he was there. Even so, after he finished, the debate about whether to approve him lasted 4 hours as he sat cloistered in another room. Bill's debate took 4 hours, but he was approved 62 votes to 34. Hardly unanimous. There was weeping and there was gnashing of teeth, and the right thing and the difficult thing were the same thing, as they so often are. Bill Johnson in 1972, rather than take a call in a church, formed a coalition, the Coalition for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Concerns. Looking back, Johnson saw the coalition as having been founded to make a challenge to the church. He said, the coalition challenged the UCC simply to honor our baptisms, to recognize that we all are called into the church by God and welcomed through baptism. Many people don't seem to understand that the affirmation that the coalition's program is asking them to give to gay and lesbian people is preceded by God's affirmation through baptism. In other words, in the United Church of Christ, when we are our better selves, we are simply trying to affirm what God has already done. Which is where I just want to end today, simply as we prepare for communion. The UCC is diverse, spread all across the land. In places we are shrinking and we are dying, and in places we are flourishing, in small churches and large. But this is where we land throughout our history. Indians, black slaves, all people of color, all people of differing orientations and gender identifications and abilities are, we affirm, people of God. And sometimes it took us a ridiculous amount of time to figure that out. And that doesn't in any way and in any capacity excuse those times when people were shut out. But I belong, and many of you belong, to a church that keeps attempting to draw the circle a little wider. And that often is both the best that you can do and also a way of understanding divine truth. It isn't of God when people are thrown out. True prophecy, loving prophecy, peaceful prophecy can be hard, and it can lead to all sorts of angst and bitterness. But Jeremiah tells us over and over again in his work that the right thing and the difficult thing are usually the same thing. And whether we're growing or whether we're shrinking, I am glad to belong to a denomination that affirms that truth. Peace be with you all.